In the heart of New Orleans, under the humid breath of the Louisiana air, stands a house that has never stopped whispering, the LaLaurie Mansion. A beautiful, decaying skeleton of the past sits quietly at the corner of Royal Street, where tourists snap photos without realizing that beneath those elegant balconies once dripped the blood of tortured souls. They call her the Witch of Louisiana. But her real name was Madame Delphine LaLaurie, a woman so rich, so refined, and so monstrously cruel that even time itself recoiled from her. This is not a ghost story. This is a human one, about class, cruelty, and corruption, about how evil can wear a silk gown and smile like an angel, while committing horrors beyond the imagination of hell itself. So if you think you can handle it, stay until the end, because by the time we reach the final scream in that attic, you'll question whether monsters are born or made. Our story begins in 1787, when Marie Delphine McCarty was born into one of New Orleans' most powerful Creole families, French in tongue, Catholic in faith, and arrogant in blood. Her family owned vast plantations, hundreds of enslaved people, and commanded respect as if they were royalty in a kingdom of sugar and suffering. Delphine was born into privilege, a child of lace, gold, and expectation. She grew up surrounded by polished chandeliers, slave servants, and the sickening perfume of wealth. But beneath that elegance was something darker, something that grew quietly behind her doll-like eyes. As a young girl, she watched how the world divided people by color, by class, by obedience, and perhaps deep inside her, she decided that she would never be the one being ruled. She would be the one who ruled. By her teenage years, Delphine's beauty was whispered across Louisiana. Her skin, they said, was pale as porcelain, her voice soft as honey, her manners divine. But beauty was her weapon, and she wielded it like a blade. At just 13, she married Ramon López y Angulo, a Spanish officer sent by the crown to oversee Louisiana's colonial rule. It was an arranged marriage, a transaction between power and ambition. They sailed to Spain, where Delphine became Madame Lopez, surrounded by royal courts and Catholic severity. But tragedy soon struck. Her husband died, or perhaps fled, before she could even give birth to their first child. Some say he fell ill. Others whisper he discovered something cold and cruel in his young wife's heart. Either way, Delphine returned to New Orleans widowed, bitter, and more dangerous than before. Her second marriage, to Jean Blanc, a banker and politician, brought her even more wealth. They owned plantations, ships, and people. Lots of people. But when Blanc died mysteriously in 1816, whispers began to circle. How could so many men close to Delphine simply disappear? But no one dared accuse her, because Delphine moved like nobility, untouchable, untamed, and unstoppable. Every tragedy only seemed to polish her social perfection. By the time she married her third husband, Dr. Leonard LaLaurie, she had become one of New Orleans' most admired women, the queen of Creole high society. She hosted lavish balls, where the city's elite gathered beneath her glittering chandeliers, and the guests would always comment on the same thing, how unusually well-behaved her servants were, too well-behaved, too silent. What no one knew was that beneath the grand facade of her mansion on Royal Street, there existed another world, a world of screams, chains, and cruelty that would make even the devil avert his eyes. Inside the LaLaurie Mansion, human beings were stripped of names, faces, and dignity. They were slaves, yes, but to Delphine, they were playthings. Neighbors began to notice strange sounds late at night, muffled cries, metallic clanging, a dragging noise on the floorboards. Then came the stench, that sickly, sweet odor of decay seeping from the walls. But when the law came knocking, Madame LaLaurie's wealth made it all disappear. One fine, well-timed donation to the governor, and all suspicions vanished. Until one day the fire began, April 10th, 1884. The day the mask of New Orleans society melted. Literally, a fire broke out in the kitchen of the LaLaurie mansion. Neighbors rushed to help. But when they forced open the locked doors, what they saw would forever haunt the city. Inside the attic were slaves chained to the walls, bodies twisted beyond recognition. Some had iron collars nailed into their flesh. Others were dissected, mutilated, left alive in torment. One witness said the walls were painted in blood. When the crowd realized what they were seeing, they stormed the house, screaming for justice. But Delphine? She was gone. Vanished, like smoke from the fire that revealed her sins. They say she fled the city in a black carriage under the cover of night, her face veiled, her jewels still glistening. Others claim she was torn apart by the mob in the streets, though no body was ever found. And so the legend began. The Witch of Louisiana. A woman so cruel, so clever, that even death couldn't catch her. But this is only half the story, because what remained inside that house, the screams, the spirits, the shadows, would echo for centuries. After the fire, New Orleans fell silent. Not because the city mourned, but because it didn't know how to comprehend what it had just seen. The LaLaurie mansion stood blackened, its elegant facade charred, its secrets exposed. They said the smell of burnt flesh lingered in the air for weeks, that no matter how many times the servants scrubbed the floors, the stains refused to vanish. And at night, when the wind passed through the broken windows, people swore they could still hear crying. The official report called it a tragic accident. But the truth spread like disease, whispered in taverns, written in secret letters, carried by fear. Dozens of enslaved people had been found chained, mutilated, or left for dead. One woman, discovered hanging by her wrists, had been alive for days without food or water. Another, a young man, was found with his mouth sewn shut, his body scarred with deliberate, artistic precision. Every victim told a story, and every story was another nail in Madame LaLaurie's coffin. But where was she? Witnesses said they saw her fleeing the city, dressed in black, her face hidden by a lace veil, her carriage tearing down Royal Street at midnight. Some claimed she escaped to Mobile, Alabama. Others swore she fled to France, living out her years under a false name. A letter discovered decades later seemed to confirm it. In it, she wrote of the ungrateful people of Louisiana and her disappointment that the world cannot appreciate discipline. She spoke of her slaves, not as human beings, but as subjects of correction. The words were cold, detached, and chillingly sincere. Delphine LaLaurie never regretted her crimes. She simply regretted being caught. But her story didn't end there, because some horrors refused to die. For years, the LaLaurie mansion sat abandoned, a burned-out husk of tragedy. Yet, strange things began to happen. Locals heard screams echoing from inside. Long after midnight, some claimed to see pale hands pressed against the windows, hands that weren't there when they looked again. New owners came and went. Every one of them left, terrified, broken or worse. In 1894, the mansion was converted into apartments. One tenant, a man known for his calm and reason, was found dead in his room, his body mutilated, his belongings untouched. Pinned beside him was a note scrawled in shaky handwriting: "They will not let me rest." Even decades later, when the building became a school for girls, the haunting continued. Children would run screaming from the hallways, claiming they'd seen a woman in black who smiled at them from the staircase. Teachers reported hearing cries from the attic, the same attic where the fire had exposed LaLaurie's horrors. And then came the night watchman. Men paid to guard the property. Every one of them quit within a week, not because of burglars, but because of voices They described hearing footsteps overhead, dragging chains across the floorboards and soft weeping from empty rooms. One guard swore he saw a woman standing in the corner of the ballroom, tall, elegant, dressed in 19th century finery. When he blinked, she was gone, but she left behind something cold, the scent of perfume and burning flesh. Over the centuries, countless investigators have entered the mansion. Ghost hunters, journalists, skeptics. Some leave laughing, others refuse to ever return. One psychic claimed that Delphine's victims still inhabit the mansion, bound to the very rooms where they died. Their pain, she said, had become part of the building's walls, soaked into the plaster, echoing through time. And Delphine herself, she too was there, not in body, but in presence, trapped in the mansion she built, surrounded by the agony she created. Hell, it seems, found her after all. It's easy to dismiss the supernatural, to say that ghosts are simply stories told to scare us. But when you stand on Royal Street at midnight, looking up at that balcony where Delphine once smiled down on her guests, you'll feel it. A heaviness, a silence too, deliberate, like the house itself is listening. Some say you can hear faint sobbing if you press your ear to the front. Others claim the door handle turns by itself, as if someone inside still wants out. Maybe it's the ghosts, or maybe it's the echo of cruelty that refuses to fade. Delphine LaLaurie's story isn't just about one woman's evil. It's about what happens when society looks away, when power shields cruelty, and when luxury hides rot. For decades, people smiled in her presence, drank her wine, and ignored the screams because she was rich, because she was beautiful, because confronting the truth was simply too uncomfortable. And that silence allowed the monster to thrive. Today, tourists line up outside the LaLaurie mansion, taking selfies and buying ghost tour tickets. They laugh nervously as guides recount the horrors inside, but few stop to think about the lives lost there, the real human beings whose pain became an attraction. The witch of Louisiana lives on, not through her legacy, but through our fascination with it. Her evil became entertainment, her victims became footnotes. And maybe that's the cruelest curse of all. As you watch this, ask yourself, how many other stories like this lie buried beneath the surface of history? How many more Delphine LaLauries smiled their way through polite society while committing unspeakable acts behind closed doors? History doesn't hide monsters. It hides the comfort that lets them exist. If this story disturbed you, if it made you think, then let it serve as a warning. Evil doesn't always wear horns. Sometimes it wears pearls, and sometimes it invites you to dinner. This has been Torture History. If you want to explore more untold horrors of our past, stories they tried to erase, then stay with us, like, comment, and subscribe. Because the next story might be darker than you're ready for.